Hello and welcome to Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that examines aspects of sound and image-based cultural production and their wider implications. I'm the host and creator Paula Blair. This time I'm joined by Shail to discuss Annihilation, the 2018 sci-fi thriller directed by Garland. Before the discussion, big thanks to our Patreon members and everyone engaging on social media. It's such a big help. I'll be back after the discussion with ways you can get in touch and support the continuation of the podcast. Continuing our love affair with Netflix, we've just had a go with Annihilation, which was only released in the UK on Netflix. We were reading a little bit about this because I remember when it was first released, Mark Kermode reviewed it on Wittertainment, which is the colloquial term for Kermode and Mayo's film review show on BBC Radio 5 Live. They have an occasional feature called Cream of the Streams, where Mark will review a big release that's on the likes of Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that. And Annihilation was a bit, I suppose, mildly controversial. It's an Garland film. He's very well known for, I never know how to pronounce this properly. I go for Ex Machina, but a lot of people say Ex Machina. I suppose it doesn't really matter. It's preference, isn't it? It's one of those words where...
Well, in the narrative theory term Deus Ex Machina, it's soft. So let's go with that. That seems to be the Latin pronunciation that people have arrived at in reviving how this dead language was pronounced. So yeah, I'd call it Ex Machina.
Okay, Ex Machina. So I think that was his directorial debut. And obviously Garland is very well known as a novelist and a screenwriter. Was behind The Beach and Sunrise.
Sunshine.
Sunshine.
Yes.
I get there in my own way.
Yes, Ex Machina, which is 2014, was his directorial debut. Executive produced and screenwrote Never Let Me Go, the adaptation of that Katsuro Ishiguro novel, for example, which I did not know. It's all connected. Oh, and also executive produced and screenwrote Dread in 2012 too.
Didn't he write 28 Days Later?
Yeah.
So he's very well known, certainly in Britain, but I think he's pretty well known in America. Annihilation had a limited release in the US. I think a lot of fans of Garland and sci-fi in general were pretty annoyed in the UK when it wasn't getting theatrical release here. It was only released on Netflix. I think that was one of the criticisms, is that it's so visually rich and stunning and there's a really complex sound design. It's probably a film that would play a lot better on the big screen. You'd feel like you'd been to an event, whereas you just watch on TV and that's that. And actually there's a lot of Natalie Portman and quite a lot of long shots and extreme long shots, and you can barely see what's going on. So I think it really is made for a big screen.
This is one of the main reasons why cinemas still even exist, is that after a good half century of competition from TVs that have been growing increasingly large and increasingly rectangular, that it still has the biggest screens. It has the most immersive experience, it has the most surrounding sound, it has the best blackout. It's a more complete showcasing of a product than you can get even with the blingiest home cinema system and the biggest widescreen plasma screen. We both liked it, for sure.
Yeah, I think we enjoyed it, and then we started to talk about it and it unravelled quite a bit. Because there are lots of plot holes, I think. There are just a lot of issues in it. To start on a really positive note, it's one of the films that shows you can have any quality of film, and having a mostly female cast, it's just not a big deal. It could have easily been 5 guys, and probably a few years ago that would have been 5 guys as the main characters carrying the film. And Natalie Portman obviously is the main character. You're following the whole way through with her, but that she becomes one of a team of 5 women who go to investigate something called the Shimmer, and those 5 women are played by Portman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Gina Rodriguez, Tuva Novotny, and Tessa Thompson, who I have to say I'm a bit down about at the minute because she looks amazing. She looks absolutely divine in the publicity for the Men in Black reboot. Maybe it's just me, I have a thing about women in suits, I don't know, but she just looks fab.
It's another one of those things that you and I have in common.
Yeah, it's a really cool cast. Oscar Isaac is back. He was in Ex Machina and he's back again as the soldier husband of Natalie Portman's character Lena. You were drawing a lot of comparisons with Arrival because the main character is a university academic, a scientist.
The perfect person to solve the great big sciencey problem.
Yeah, is a biologist.
The real world sciencey problem. And has a tragic backstory and is going to be called upon by unspecified, slightly government-y, clearly government funded but maybe covert department, and asked to put herself into an extremely stressful situation for the good of her fellow humans that she has absolutely no connection with. And through the film establishes something of a connection with her fellow humans. The comparison's relatively limited though, because in spite of the film having one of those flashback structures, which is quite common these days, and that also is shared by Arrival. Arrival's flashback structure is much more complicated, and at the end turns out to actually be a flash forward structure in a kind of
palindrome.
This has our main characters having a lot less control over the alien circumstances that they go up against, and they do turn out to be roughly alien circumstances, such that when Lena comes out, it's not even clear that it's still Lena. The whole theme of the shimmer is it has this ability to change your DNA. Now, of course, you could just change the DNA in every single cell in my body right now, and that would mean that the cells in my body that make proteins for things like repair would stop making the right proteins. They start making the wrong proteins and I just very quickly die, right? But of course, in this slightly magic world, change someone's DNA and you actually start to make it as if you changed it back when they were just a newly fertilized egg, that period when they were gestating. And so they find creatures, they find an alligator and it's got teeth that an alligator shouldn't have, in addition to teeth that an alligator should have. It's got loads more teeth, seemingly shark teeth.
Yeah, it's got rows of them.
So it's got not atavisms, but the characteristics of an organism from a completely different branch of the tree is not the right metaphor, the bush of life. This isn't quite it's being reverted in its evolutionary history. This is something is coming along and rewriting its DNA and also making it so that DNA is expressed in every structure of its body. It grows new structures. Its structures of its body change, which wouldn't happen if you were to do that now. But I'm doing too much real science in this science fiction film. And then in addition to that, and so of course this has happened to an extent, and it's all done with microscopes, to Lena by the end of the film. So something about her has changed, as we get to see by changes in her iris at the very end, which suggest this is a different person from the one who went in. In addition to that, what the shimmer does is it seems to just do a bunch of other magic-y things as well, a bunch of things that aren't really explained. Like a bear kills one of the characters, it kills Cass, doesn't it? Cass Shepherd. The bear's roar becomes Cass's dying cries. Now under the influence of the shimmer, if an animal kills something, it ingests, metaphorically, that thing's voice. Now that's got no explanation whatsoever. There's no attempt to try and produce some sort of matter and energy, here's how the physics works, explanation of that. It's just this is what the shimmer does. The shimmer at the end, and when they finally get to the thing that is at the centre of it, what are its abilities? It can take you and dissolve every kilojoule of energy in your body into heat in a second. It basically is magic. If we took some of our understanding of science and looked through the consequences of an event happening that would be unusual but not impossible, according to that understanding, that form of science fiction, it gradually just gave way to these are magic things from outer space that have come to do very visually cool things to us, things that took a long time in our visual effects department to create, and things that are extremely affecting as well. There's a very careful, non-squelchy body horror element in this, but it just stopped being science. That form of science fiction, that definition of science fiction, whereas this is based on scientific knowledge that we have, science fiction, by the end. That's not to say that that's a bad thing. It's notable that it starts off as this is based on science that we know, science fiction, and then just becomes this is just magic by another name, science fiction, by the end. So I think it's important to flag. Also, our completely female team did have the small drawback of being quite inept.
One thing that annoyed me a bit was one of the characters, the Gina Rodriguez character, I think, Anya. She's a paramedic and she starts to complain about things being too heavy. And I'm thinking, but dude, you lift people.
Yes.
How is that a bit heavy for you? So it's things like she finds a gun, a really big gun, and she complains it's really heavy, and she's holding up the top of the alligator mouth.
Yes, yeah.
and she complains that that's really heavy and has to drop it. Out of the 5, she looks like the most physically robust of the 5 of them, and she keeps complaining things are heavy, so I thought that was a bit odd.
She's also the one who psychologically starts to disintegrate
Yeah,
first.
she disintegrates really quickly. The rest of them hold it together a lot better, or at least cope with it better. But then again, you see, I'm thinking of things like The Thing, John Carpenter, body horrors. They would have had, if not all male, but mostly male casts, and it's actually the same sort of ineptitude, I think, that you would find in any of those older films. The strong female character is a bit problematic because what does it mean by strong? Is that even realistic? Where actually they're allowed to be inept as well, and some do better than others. Do you know what I mean? So they should be the same as equivalent male characters. There are inept male characters and there are strong male characters in the likes of films of this ilk. That actually didn't bother me too much.
I was going to observe that this is, I suppose, a narrative in which it's clear that several teams that are mostly men have gone in before.
Exactly,
and they've all just disappeared,
Yeah.
which included a variety of different ways in which it turns out that people can disappear in this. It seems that you can decide to just turn into a plant.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that the Shimmer permits you to do. One of our main characters does that. It's the one played by
Tessa Thompson's character.
Josie who does it.
Josie.
Yeah, it's clear that our male teams have failed beforehand and that it's our all-female team that succeeds, although it's just Lena, it's just Natalie Portman's character that succeeds, everyone else dies. This is the, in spite of being inept in some regards, the female team is able to do something the male teams couldn't do, narrative. But at the same time, the reason they can do it is because they keep happening across stuff left for them by the male teams, specifically by the male team that contained Kane, Lena's husband, who went missing a year beforehand. Even the one weapon that seems to be effective against the alien who she meets at the end, which is a white phosphorus grenade, she gets that from a box of grenades that he left in the lighthouse before killing himself and seemingly sending an alien-created doppelganger off to go and replace him back in the outside world. It is one of those, there are male support teams behind our female protagonist narratives too. It's the women can do it on their own as long as they're not actually on their own, as long as they have a bit of help narrative. But I suppose that is counterbalanced by the...
But it inverts what had happened before because they were all on the base before. All of them apart from Lena, who's quite new to it all. But the rest of them, so it's a psychologist, a paramedic, people of different types of training. They've all been working on the base, some of them for a really long time, some of them for a couple of years, some for 10 months, some for a couple of months. And they've been the team behind the scenes of all the men going out. They've been the support team already, and then it's inverted, it goes the other way.
There is quite a lot of these female characters not really knowing how to use guns. So Lena has to show them how it's done.
Yeah, because she's former army. She was in the army for 7 years and then left the army to become a biologist, presumably got a PhD, then started to work for Johns Hopkins University, isn't it?
Yes.
As a lecturer. It's a scene that echoes Arrival in that a lot of it, in a way, kicks off with her giving a lecture or seminar. You see some of her research and it's specifically on cancer cells, so mutating cells. It's important to think a bit about the narrative structure because it is very back and forth in time and memory is playing, because it's what you're seeing when you see what happens in The Shimmer. It's actually a recounting, a retelling of it. It's a memory from this version of Lena who is the original Lena but changed. It turns out at the end it begins with her waking up and seemingly being interrogated, but actually the team's trying to get information. This team is headed up by, what's his name? It's Lomax. I don't know if his name was ever said in it, but he's played by Benedict Wong
with his gravelly voice.
He and a huge team of
extras,
personnel, half the crew probably,
whose job it is to stand there and stare
in hazmat suits, staring at her while he's asking her questions, and she's telling this story at considerable length, and they're all standing there, it must imagine, for hours because it's so detailed. And so she's telling the whole story of what's happened, but also within that story space of her telling her story, she's getting flashbacks. So I don't know, how much is what she's telling them and how how much is we're just seeing I think we're just seeing what happened to her, and we see the flashbacks that she seems to have experienced when she's been in that time.
There's sort of norms about flashbacks where, in order to specify that it is the recollection of a memory in the ongoing present, you have to have some sort of thing at the beginning or something at the end that goes, hey, this person is now beginning to recollect a memory. So you might see somebody go a bit misty-eyed. Or if it's some other sort of event in internal consciousness that doesn't have anything to do with the outside world, in the ongoing present, rather than a switch to another point in time. Like a dream, for example, there'll be something at the end which is often somebody waking up quite suddenly. We have that at one of those points when she's recollecting having sex with somebody who isn't her husband.
Who's her colleague from the university.
And so we get flashbacks to that same scene that she's been dreaming about again later. So there's a few little tags here and there that go, okay, your basic structure for this film is, it starts off in the present, she's being interrogated by Lomax, she tells the story, it's going to take some time. The whole story is then told in flashback with the occasional popping back to the present again. And within that story told in flashback, there are moments when what she's telling Lomax about is recollecting memories from the even earlier past as well. So there's flashbacks within flashbacks. That's a way of doing it. But there are also some signs here and there that it's not quite that simple. We actually have two presents in this film. And we're switching between the present, which is her after the mission into the shimmer, and the present, which is her during the shimmer. And so what we actually have is her recollecting stuff from before the shimmer mission in flashbacks. And then the film is just going, I'm now going to pop to the future to tell you about a bit more of the Lomax interrogation until the two presents that we have finally coincide as the shimmer mission ends and we get back up to where we started.
There is quite an elliptical experience of time. There's problems with memory. When we have the first scene of the group of 5 women inside the shimmer, they are counting up their food supplies. They wake up and they're all really disorientated, and they realise that given how much food is missing and what the state of their supplies are, they've probably already been in there for at least 3 days, and they have no memory of those 3 days. They walked in through this shimmer. It looks a bit like a force field or something, that they just walk through it. It's like walking through a bubble almost, because it's got that oily colour, you know, the colours are spread out and it's moving quite a lot. They just walk through it into this area. It's covering what seems to be a national park and a beach coastal area. The impact has happened in a lighthouse and then it keeps spreading out from there. And so they've just walked through this, and that's the last memory they have. So they've lost at least 3 days. They have to start thinking, well, how do we mark time in here? It doesn't seem to happen to them again though, because I thought maybe it would be the sort of thing where if they fell asleep, they'd then forget what had happened the previous day, but it doesn't seem to happen again.
This film is so understated. Just looking back at the plot description, which a very helpful fellow human has stuck on Wikipedia, there's that early scene in which Lomax says to her, you were in there for about 4 months. How long do you think you were in there for? And Lena goes, a few days? Maybe a week or 2 at the outside. We were in there for 4 months? That's a surprise to her. Clearly we're set up to expect that there's going to be these amnesia moments on the inside, and we get one of those. And then that's just it. The film goes, okay, I'm not going to keep reminding you about this. We've told you that. On we go. You know, if you're going to break the rule of 3s, which is you have to tell your audience everything 3 times, breaking it by going, I'm only going to tell you twice. I'm going to trust you to remember it from now on, seems a little bit brave. And the film does this understatedness in several ways. And one that I was expecting a payoff for was the tattoo. Because Anya, so the Gina Rodriguez character, who's the ballsier character, she's got an Ouroboros. It's like a lemniscate. It's the infinity symbol tattoo on her left forearm, on the inside of it. And during the interrogation with Lomax after this whole mission, when Lena's the only one to have come out alive, it's clear that she's got it on her left forearm as well, but it's not visible on her arm before the mission. So it's clear that somehow the experience in the shimmer has made it so that she's got a duplicate of Anya's tattoo on her arm. And there's several moments when there's a medium close-up of Lena's arm and you can see this figure 8 in bruises on her arm, and at one point she goes, oh, I must have knocked it, I've got this bruising on my arm. And then it's never mentioned again. It's just understated. Clearly somehow one of our characters, through whatever effect the shimmer has acquired a characteristic from another character.
It's a bit like the bear, and the bear isn't like a normal bear. The bear is a very disturbingly shaped bear. The way it has taken on Cass's cries for help and distress could be indicating something like that Lena has somehow absorbed some of Anya in some way, maybe some of the rest of them, but it's unclear.
We're talking here from a position where neither of us have read the novel, that it's based on. The screenplay was written by Alex Garland, but it's an adaptation of a novel by Jeff Vandermeer. Neither of us have read it, but apparently the adaptation is quite loose. This may very well be a novel that's implicitly about taking our knowledge about how evolution works and about common ancestry, which is overtly stated by Lena in her lecture at Johns Hopkins at the beginning of the film. Taking our knowledge about it and then just taking a bunch of other ways in which people have proposed that biodiversity came about and just piling those in as well. The shimmer magically makes these things happen too. The thing with Lena getting one of Anya's tattoos seems to allude to the whole idea of the inheritance of acquired characteristics. So the idea goes, it's a rubbish idea, but it was a theory that was proposed well before Darwin, which was that if an organism was marked in some way by predators, say if it had scars on its neck from being attacked by predators, its own offspring would have scars on their neck when they were born. The form you might have heard of it in is the idea that this is the reason why giraffes have long necks. It's that they clearly started off with short necks, and some of them would stretch their necks a little bit to reach the high plants, and as a result of this stretching that went on during their lifetimes, their offspring would be born with stretched necks, and that would just happen again and again over successive generations. Utter nonsense, of course. Natural selection combined with random mutation has been shown to be the actual reason for why giraffes have long necks. There's a bit in, I think it's in Genesis, so this is the first book of the both Jewish and Christian Bibles, which says that one of the characters gets goats to produce speckled and striped offspring by having them reproduce in the presence of speckled and striped sticks. As if that somehow explains biodiversity.
Gives them inspiration.
What you look at when you are reproducing influences your offspring. Of course, we've come up with this mountain of completely incorrect explanations for biodiversity over the millennia.
If that was true, think of the many different designs we'd all have on our skin. What people were looking at in the psychedelic 60s and 70s.
There's all these fantasies of how biodiversity comes about, and they seem to have just been piled in on top of a possibly sciencey piece of fiction plot in this, which is fine. That's a bit refreshing to have a film that just goes...
Yeah, it's not beating you around the face.
I'll tell you it twice, and then we'll move on to something else. Also refreshing was sound design, which was a little bit like listening to an ambient album.
It was a bit,
It was something to ease yourself into.
I wonder about this, because you were saying you were looking into it doesn't seem to have done very well anywhere. I mean, how do you measure success, even with a film with such a limited release? Maybe Netflix have figures on how many people have watched it by now. I don't know.
And we have to take into account just how much money the original financing companies would have got from Netflix, if any money at all. But yeah, in terms of theatrical release, off a budget of roughly 40 million, and that's a production budget, so that doesn't even take into account prints and advertising budget as well. And then of course we need to take into account how much of the box office ultimately goes to the distribution company. But off a production budget of $40 million, at the end of its theatrical run in the US and Canada, in the US and Canada alone, it had taken less than $33 million at the box office. So that's definitely, at the box office at least, quite a significant loss. However, it's normal for films that lose money at the box office to then go on to something like break even on the back of DVD sales.
But then...
So Netflix digital distribution may be the new way in which that is done. As usual, the answer is it's complicated.
Yeah,
in terms of theatrical releases, it's done poorly.
Also, its release seems to have been so limited, it may not have been possible for it to rake back its money, even if everybody had piled in who could have.
Looking at its release in the US and Canada, at the widest point of its release, it was showing at 2,112 theatres across the US and Canada. What I must quickly check is if by Box Office Mojo, theatres actually means engagements, which can actually mean multiple screens at one theatre.
Yeah.
So that number might not actually mean theatres, it might mean screens, and therefore
screens.
It might have only been something like 1,500 screens.
But even then, that sounds very low for two really huge countries.
Yes, saturation release for the US and Canada is well upwards of 3,500 theatres, sometimes over 4. It's not limited release in the sense of it's released at 8, maybe going up to about 200 or 300. That's probably limited release, but this is smaller than blockbuster release.
Well, you would normally get.
But this is also how the internet comes to get to like films, isn't it? Is if the internet goes, that thing has done rather poorly at the box office. I think this might make it fashionable to like it.
What I was going to say was, it seems that Netflix seems to be the films that they've been investing in, and certainly what we've watched so far, it's very hard to pinpoint a genre, because yes, sci-fi is the big broad one, but it's what kind of sci-fi is it? Is it horror, thriller, mystery, fantasy? There's so many different kinds. You can have sci-fis that are romance based, for example. This one I thought was quite hard to pin down because there was potential for body horror, and there was probably a little bit of that, but it was really just with the bear attack. That was the only time where you felt any real sense of harm. We were starting to react quite audibly at that. Largely it was quite uneven, because you were saying about the ambient sound. The sound design and the music were largely quite calming, and it was very gentle.
And particularly during the bear attack, when I was going, okay, the norm now is that the music should get quite intense. This is an intense action scene.
But no, it held back.
So that this bear was attacking some of our main characters, and the music was doing very little.
Yeah.
There was still music there. There was this noticeable absence of something to say, you should probably be worried now.
Just the action was enough, and the characters were stifling their reactions. They were trying not to scream. They were trying not to react, because they were just trying to keep calm, to not distress this creature and make it attack them. They were trying really hard to keep really calm as much as possible. So there was that as well. It's like the film was almost with them, like it was almost in sympathy with them. It didn't want to get people excited, because you're trying to keep calm in a situation like this. Because the problem is that the second bear attack happens when Anya has tied up the other remaining 3 characters and is interrogating Lena. They found video footage from the previous group who'd gone in, and Kane was one of those, and they've seen him in the video. Lena wears a locket with a photo of him in it, and Anya has been becoming more and more paranoid and agitated gradually as they've gone on. She has found the locket and has knocked the other 3 out and tied them up, and is in the middle of interrogating them when the bear attacks. What happens is they hear Cass's voice, and she says, oh, you've lied about this as well, and runs out to get Cass, but of course gets mauled by the bear who has absorbed the voice. And so then it's creeping around the 3 of them, and they're tied up, and it's so tense. It's a really well done scene. It's really, really tense. I've really felt the fear with them, because they can't move, and it's baring teeth, and it's got this awful angular shape to its face.
Like a lot of its flesh and skin has disappeared off its skull, so it's mostly teeth and cheekbones.
It's all pared back, and it's quite skeletal looking in the face. It's a very odd shape, and it's walking around, but it's huge as well.
One bit of the body horror is that when it attacks Anya, because she staggers back in, because it's mauled her, it hasn't quite killed her, she staggers back in, she's got a gun, she can barely lift it though. Again, not quite strong enough. She has, I suppose, been mauled by a bear by this point. And she starts shooting it, but it's not enough, and the bear attacks her again, and quite brutally finishes her off this time. One of the body horror elements is it rips her jaw off, which is, it's very splattery. Another one of the body horror elements is when they find the aftermath of one of the members of the previous team. They've seen a bit of the footage, because there was a little data card left for them by the previous team. They've seen that this guy, he was found by his fellow soldiers to have changed enough that his intestines seem to have turned into like a worm. They find him, but it's months later, of course, than when he was cut open, and he seems to have turned into a lichen that's spread up the wall, so that from the waist upwards at least, he's essentially just this huge colony of plant cells.
Yeah, and his skeleton has spread up throughout it, and it's in this huge empty swimming pool. So he's at the bottom of the deep end of a very large, deep swimming pool. So it really demonstrates the scale of the growth of this thing. It's all the way up through the walls of the room even. So he's right at the bottom of it. So it's up the side of the pool and extending out over that. It's just huge, this thing that's grown from his body.
So body horror elements for sure. And when you mentioned there's some sci-fi which is romance, I thought of Passengers. which is very sweet. So
I
okay, yeah, it's very.
think so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, except for the
Like
I'm
with a
gonna
rapey bit.
force you to
Be alive.
die of old age.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, apart from that, the film at least goes, it's fine if you're well motivated in doing that to somebody as long as you tell them and they forgive you. But no romance elements here. What's happened by the end with Lena and Kane both being survivors is that they both seem to have gone, well, neither of us in our own ways is the person we were before we went into that thing, so we're both different. Should we hang out?
It left me wondering, could they then breed and create more of these? Is that then how they could spread? It comes up, doesn't it, in the film? It's not an invasion because it seems like it's been a meteor has fallen to Earth. It seems to be completely accidental. In a way, it reminded me of Evolution, which is a comedy sci-fi.
With David Duchovny?
With David Duchovny. It reminded me of that because it's the freak thing that happens. It's not an alien race trying to invade and take over the planet. It seems to be totally by chance.
Well, yeah, it seems that either there was something alive and conscious in this meteor, or there was just enough organic matter. Amino acids have been found in meteors, so I think this is the kind of thing that this sci-fi is drawing.
Yeah, it's the point of Lena's lecture at the start. She's saying that all life on Earth started from one cell.
Yeah, it's even the case that there's very rudimentary forms of evolution applied even to pre-cellular organic compounds as well. Life on Earth seems to have very gradually wobbled itself together even before there was such a thing as a cell. So yeah, I suppose, that's all set up, is that if this thing has some complex organic compounds on it, without being conscious, it can be completely causing everything that's going on. And as Dr. Ventress, who says it at the end, she's got into the lighthouse first and she seems to have just instantly understood the process that's going on, that the whole shimmer is about. And that process is something is going to take all of the organic matter on Earth and just dissolve it down to the molecular level, even to the elemental level, and then just use it as raw materials for new organic arrangements. And then it just dissolves her into this cloud of energy. That seems to be what's going to go on. Lena, when she's talking to Lomax after all this has happened, having accidentally phosphorus grenaded the centre of this thing out of existence, does seem to be okay with the prospect of that happening. Even though she's prevented it from happening, she seems to say, well, it would just be changing life on this planet. Life would still exist, just in a completely different form.
I think the point was being made is that it's not malicious, it's just this has happened. Just like our evolution's happened. I mean, we don't know where that first cell came from. The theories that it could be from meteors, the first life on Earth.
Some of the first organic compounds, there's one theory that could have come from meteors, Apparently the first cell would have been a protocell in which a replicating molecule would have been enclosed within a bilipid layer. Because apparently there's this thing which fat molecules do, where they spontaneously create these bi-layer shapes, which can become spherical. So they're basically rudimentary cell walls. There was point after point where I was going, this is drawing on recent science. So the fact that Lena's lecture said, basically all life on Earth comes from a single common ancestor. Okay, that's drawing on recent science. Life has been around on this planet for nearly 4 billion years. Again, that draws on scientific discoveries of microfossils that are in rocks over 3 billion years old during the last decade or so. So there's kind of yummy sciencey bits. But one thing that got me at certain points was this realization of common ancestry with single-celled bacteria. This realization that everything that's alive on this planet's got DNA in it, and therefore we have exactly the same chemical basis, the same combination of polypeptides in us and amino acids that every other living thing does. It's not we've got them in different orders, but it's the same chemicals. This is being treated as, wow, this is horrific. That humans share common ancestors even with plants, as far as this film is concerned, is a horrific thing. That you can prod humans' DNA and make that common ancestry with plants, basically turn them into plants. I mean, there were some elements where it was shown to be, this is kind of pleasant to think of ourselves as being these things who are just several billion years away from plants. And the bit where Josie, who just decides, I think I'm just going to turn into a plant now, and you can just about see her, she seems to be sprouting leaves as she walks off behind this tree and then disappears. There was that moment of, okay, it's fine, this common ancestry thing that is being brought violently up into the present by the shimmer. But in most of its other moments, the film was going, fear this. This is a seriously disturbing element of our biological history. It was using common ancestry for horror purposes. So I think it's safe to say that this is sci-fi stroke horror. Would you stick another subgenre marker into it?
There is quite a bit of drama. There were times when I was thinking, well, what's all of this a metaphor for? Because there's the very obvious, there's been an affair happening, the husband husband's found out, he takes this mission that he knows he probably won't come back from.
So psychological drama, I suppose,
Yeah.
given how intense situations are that these people are put into.
What we learn about the characters who are assembled at this base near the Shimmer, they pretty much all have a reason to be in despair or not want to be alive. Dr. Ventress says that, you know, she's having a discussion with Lena, and Lena says, but these people weren't suicidal. And Ventress explains, well, nobody's really suicidal, it's self-destructive. We find out from Lomax that Ventress has cancer, hasn't got long to live anyway, so she gives herself to the mission. With Josie, who is quite a young academic, she's got scars all over her arms because she's been self-harming, and Cass describes that as her not trying to kill herself but trying to feel alive. She's trying to feel the pain. So it's understandable then that she finds some sort of deeper connection or deeper purpose, and she feels like she fits more in this potential world. They go through all their losses. Isn't it Cass has lost her daughter to leukemia?
Yeah.
Very similar to Arrival again, with the death of a daughter. Isn't it Anya? She is an alcoholic, a recovering alcoholic. There's a very clunky reference to her being a lesbian. The film, I think, was trying very hard to be very inclusive. There was different races in the cast. It was largely very heteronormative. There was no reason to mention that this person was a lesbian, but they felt the need to get it in there, even though she was coded as probably a lesbian because she was a little bit butch, but feminine enough to complain about everything being really heavy.
This really got to you, didn't it?
No, she looks really robust. Why is she complaining that everything's really heavy? But then maybe that's a stereotype, and maybe it was breaking a stereotype. So to give it the benefit of the doubt, maybe it was just doing that no, she's not. Maybe she's one of those people who on the outside looks really strong, but actually she breaks down first, as you pointed out, and the rest of them all hold it together, even though they're physically not as robust looking as her. Maybe they're just breaking a stereotype with that.
While we're back onto the subject of the trauma that our main characters bring with them, which this has in common with Arrival, another one of those things that this has in common with Arrival is, just as Arrival matured Amy Adams' star persona by a decade, this has done the same thing to Natalie Portman's star persona as
Do you
well.
think?
Because she's been habitually playing women who are younger than she actually is for quite some time. It's time for a reset.
I would have thought Jackie, playing Jackie O, did that though.
Oh, of course, yeah, I missed that.
We haven't seen it, so that's why it's not really so much in a but I think that was probably the role that did that. But you could be right, this is probably her established now as, right, I'm doing mature characters, playing academics. But I thought it was interesting though, the bit where she's being mirrored by the alien creature that mimics her. There is an element of dance in that, so it was making me think of Black Swan a little bit. The rupturing personality. It was a bit like a dance.
The actor who played the character that the credits call the humanoid is Sonoya Mizuno, who is a dancer. And that was an entrancing bit of the film.
Yeah, fascinating.
It reminded me of quite a few sci-fi and fantasy games where suddenly your character is being mirrored by a doppelganger. And so if you fight the doppelganger, you're
fighting yourself.
Yeah, you're just injure yourself. So you have to find some other way of getting away from the doppelganger.
Because again, it was very symbolic. It was making me think, well, what's she trying to run away from? She tries to take a preemptive defensive move, but ends up with the humanoid hurting and knocking her out, but it gets knocked out as well, and tries to run for the door, and it runs for the door and almost crushes her against it. She's knocked out again, and there's this constant dance because they're trying to go the same way. There was just something about, what is it about yourself that you're trying to let go of, that you have to confront? She's living with the guilt of this lengthy affair she seems to have had with her colleague Daniel, who's another lecturer at the university. He's played by David Gyasi, is that? Do you think?
Yeah.
It's implied that maybe it was a one-time thing, but then it shows a conversation that they have, and it implies that it's gone on for quite a while, and that Kane has found out about it, and then the next thing is he goes on this mission that he's probably not going to come back from, and Daniel is a bit too familiar with Lena in the workplace.
There's elbow touching.
There's elbow touching.
Which is always a sign.
Yes.
Daniel even says, does Kane know that we're having an affair? And that implies this has been happening for a while.
That's in the bedroom scene, Yeah, the fact that they even call it an affair implies that it's more than just I'm really lonely, my husband's never here type thing, and he's married as well. It's a bit complicated, so she's carrying all of that. She's carrying a lot of guilt from that. There's definitely a psychological element in there too. I mean, having a psychologist character and Lena being surprised at the team being headed up by a psychologist, and it seems that something psychological happens. They know that there's something psychological goes on inside the Shimmer.
And Ventress is absolutely no help with the psychological impact of
None
being
at
in
all.
the Shimmer. She's I'm dying of cancer, I've got to get to the centre of this thing, and I've got to
no cares
hand
to
its
give.
arse to it, and that's all I'm here for. And that even means that I'll just leave the rest of you behind when things start to get urgent.
Yeah, when it hits the fan, she just goes. It's gonna look up Jennifer Jason Leigh, because I feel like, to me, she's still about 19 or something. So it's really odd to see her in quite a mature role.
Should we go all the way down to her first role? Out of 97. Quite a lot of telly.
1976.
If we go past TV movies and TV, 1981, her first theatrical film. 1982, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Never seen that. That is my winner at humiliation, that I haven't seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Can't remember if I've seen it or not. I probably haven't. Backdraft.
Are you enjoying a trip down the 90s?
Hudsucker Proxy. She is one of these people. Her name comes up a lot. She's done loads of stuff I've watched over the years.
I hesitate to call certain actors workhorses because it implies that they look horsey. And I'm not implying that. And I don't think anyone other than me would go, you've described the person as a workhorse, you reckon they have an equine face. So I'm going to do it. She is a workhorse of...
Yeah, she hasn't stopped really.
Of Hollywood, yeah.
I just always picture her as being really young, and I think she's just one of these people who suddenly become her age.
It will happen to all of us.
No, but it's a really cool role for her, because she's just so blank in it, in a good way. You know, she's not like a piece of wood or anything. She's so matter of fact in it, and she's so focused on what she's doing. There were times where I was thinking, what's this symbolic of? I don't know what you think, but I thought with the set design of the very centre, the say ground zero part, they go inside the lighthouse and there's this hole they go down, and it's this little cylindrical rock cavern, and then it opens out into this pocket. So I was of course thinking it was very vaginal, and that it was like it's giving birth to new forms of life, so it's the womb of this thing.
And the meteor, whatever it was, that hit the base of a lighthouse. And so it created this hole in the wall of the lighthouse, and then another hole into the ground inside the lighthouse. So it was a little bit like a...
Pierces it, it's penetrative. Yeah.
The design of the chamber underneath the lighthouse that the meteor impact had created, it did look a bit like the alien environments in Ridley Scott's Alien and various sequels. I thought, oh, actually, is this actually just a crashed ship? We're seeing the interior of this familiar set design ship, so maybe that's what's going on, but no, it just seemed to have been what was carved out by the impact of the meteor.
But no, it did seem like it was become clear that the entrance of that little chamber inside was like a cervix, and Lena has to travel in and out of it. Just the idea of life being fostered in there and having to get back out of it again, you know, and she is reborn when she comes out. She's a different version of herself when she leaves.
She flees out of that birth canal.
Manages to trick her copy into blowing itself up.
Not only does she put a phosphorus grenade in the hand of her copy and then pull the pin and then just run off, killing the copy. The copy then just starts touching everything.
Sets fire to the whole thing.
So it sets fire to all of the other kind of organic things that it's created on the inside and even outside the lighthouse, and everything burns. So it's one of these films that goes, oh, these weapons don't work, those weapons don't work, guns don't work, but actually fire.
Just fire.
Good old-fashioned fire. That's the thing that makes us human. That's the thing that means we can master this invasion.
There is a point, and it comes up in one of her final speeches to Lomax, that often out of destruction comes new things, comes growth, comes new life. Maybe it was doing that under the understanding that she is already changed and that their new life has a chance of surviving through both her and the copy of Cain that's already out there. And the copy of Cain, he is breaking down. His internal organs have failed. He's completely breaking down, and we learn that as soon as the shimmer is dispelled, as soon as it's burnt to the ground, he's completely fine. He's functioning like a human again. And then they have an encounter, and it's actually just through the close-ups, the extreme close-ups on their eyes, that you learn neither of them are human. That really reminded me of Human Is. It went a bit Philip K. Dick for me.
Yeah.
There. Do you remember? We watched Electric Dreams, the series, and Human Is was the one where an alien version of the human takes over, and he's actually a better human than the guy he replaced.
Bryan Cranston. That was great. In fact, we should have done a recording on Electric Dreams, actually, because that was a fantastic series.
We could still do, because it didn't really get any critical acclaim, but I loved it. I really loved that series. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I'd love to watch it again.
Particularly the one in which these mechanoids didn't know they were human, and they're thinking that they were humans who are fighting against the machine, but they are actually machines themselves.
Yeah.
It's just perfect stuff.
They were really great ones, and Geraldine Chaplin, what a joy. It reminded me of that. It was, do they have potential to be better humans and to have a better relationship? But then also there's that foreboding fear of what if they breed and they have a new race, but then is that not necessarily a bad thing? There's a new version of what a human can be.
Looking at science fiction history, there's division in British science fiction between the Wellesian global invasion of, say, the War of the Worlds and the John Wyndham, what's called the soft apocalypse of novels like The Midwich Cuckoos. Because in War of the Worlds, the Martians just rock up and go, we're taking you guys down, and we're going to utterly change your environment as we do so. Whereas The Midwich Cuckoos is about a rather mysterious event where in several villages around the world, suddenly everyone just goes to sleep for a couple of days. If anyone even goes into the village, they just fall asleep. And then a couple of days later, everyone wakes up again and it's fine. But then 9 months later, every woman in that village gives birth to a blonde-haired child.
Is that Children of the Corn? Is that what that's...
It's called Children of the Damned, the film adaptation of it. It's called Children of the Damned.
Yes.
No, it's called Village of the Damned.
Village of the Damned.
And then the sequel's called Children of the Damned.
Yes.
So it turns out that this is part of an alien invasion cuckoo style, in that these aliens aren't just going to swan in and go, this is our planet now. They're just going to very carefully impregnate quite a lot of people with these things that aren't actually their own kids.
And then if you know, how can you kill them?
Yeah.
Can you do it? What are the ethics of that?
The novel and the film, they're both great on that, because the mothers of these kids will defend these kids with their lives. The kids are also psychic, so they can tell if you're planning to attack them. So the only way you can possibly attack them is to somehow trick them away from their parents and shield yourself from thinking about what you're about to do in like blowing up a whole village hall full of them, for example. And that's how the main character does manage to destroy them. So it's this apocalypse which is a lot more difficult to stand up against.
Yes.
Now in Annihilation, it starts off as a Wellesian Martian style, very slow, but as Dr. Ventress says, very slowly they're going to take us and they're going to annihilate us. They're going to annihilate everything here and they're going to turn us into a new form of life. Right up until the end, that seems to be the plan, and then when Lena puts the phosphorus grenade into the hand of the humanoid and the humanoid seems to go, okay, fine, let's do this now. That seems to be a shift to, we'll have a soft apocalypse instead. We'll have a Wyndham-esque soft apocalypse in which there will just be the doppelganger of Cain, who is created by whatever this alien force is, and the changed Lena, and these two things will be the beginning of how a new form of life will be created amongst humans.
Yeah, because the humans who have borne witness to this, they think it's all razed to the ground. They think it's all been burned. So there's nothing to worry about as far as they're concerned.
Lena's the only one who's seen evidence that Cain is not actually Cain.
Yeah.
And the camera with the evidence on it gets burnt down in the lighthouse.
Nobody knows to ask about the tattoo that's on her arm because they didn't know those people. Anybody who knew them is also gone. It makes a point that these were all people who had no one because you had to be willing to die why to go into this thing.
You know what we've done? We've started off going, this is impressive, and then we've gone, it's shrunk on us.
I found it unravelled a wee bit when
Yeah.
we started to talk about it. But
And
yeah,
now we've discovered some of its strengths. at
I
least.
think so. I enjoyed it. I would recommend giving it a go.
Now, of course, we are talking about if you've already got Netflix for absolutely no more money than you're currently spending, watch it.
Just watch
Yeah.
it. Just give it a
we're
chance.
saying, I would actually even say this belongs in a sci-fi collection. It's Alex Garland. It's part of his ongoing, very science fiction opus. It's part of a very cerebral, very female-centered, very effects-heavy, but not action-heavy strand of sci-fi that's going on at the moment. Get hold of a DVD if you want to buy a DVD. That sounds so old school now, doesn't it? Of buying an object. I'd recommend that too. Oh, I just felt the urge. I'm going to do it. I'd give it about 7 to 8 out of 10. Do you want to be crude enough?
I don't know. Not really fussed on putting numbers on these things, but I enjoyed the experience of watching it. It was interesting and it has borne fruit, I think.
We can ask for nothing more. Put it on in the chill out room. I want to make a commitment to not, for the next movie we watch it on Netflix. We're going to figure out what the inside of a cinema looks like. So, on that... on that invitation for you to take me to the Odeon to go and see a subtitled foreign language film, I think we're done.
You've been listening to Audiovisual Cultures with me, Paula Blair, and Andrew Shail. This episode was recorded and edited by Paula Blair. The music is Common Ground by Airtone, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 and downloaded from ccmixter.org. If you like the show, please support its production with donations to paypal.me/PEI Blair or become a member on patreon.com/AVcultures. From as little as $1 a month on the Pay What You Can tier, patrons receive access to exclusive previews, extended show notes and video transcripts. Episodes are released every other Wednesday. Please do rate, share and subscribe on your chosen platform as this helps others find the show. For more information and to see what any money received goes towards or how else you can be involved, visit audiovisualcultures.wordpress.com. Follow AV Cultures on Facebook and Twitter for updates and links to items relevant to the discussions. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.